It's my great pleasure to pivot from two leaders in communications, climate communications, and science communication to two leaders in local government who are well known, and their long tenure has earned them both incredible respect over the years. Verdenia Baker, the county administrator for Palm Beach County, and Bertha Henry, the county administrator for Broward County. uh, uh, our two esteemed county leaders will be talking about lessons in resilient leadership during a year of crisis. And moderating the conversation is John Van Arnam, the Deputy County Administrator for Palm Beach County.
Well, thank you, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here with my favorite county administrator and my second favorite county administrator. And I'll let you figure out which is which. We've got some very interesting and timely questions for both of the administrators. And we're so happy that you took the time to tune into this virtual broadcast. And we thank both of the administrators for participating this morning. So I'm going to jump right in with some questions. And because there's just two of you, I think it makes sense that you both can comment on the questions, because frankly, they're all very good questions, and I'd like to hear from you both if possible. I'm sure our audience would. So let me start with this. Both of you have long experience in local government and have weathered in past crises and economic challenges. How does 2020 stand out among those past events? What's similar and what's dissimilar? And I'll start with you, Ms. Henry.
Well, I've been in local government for over 40 years, and I'll leave it at that. And I have experienced major downturns in the economy, hurricanes, actually locusts. I lived in the Midwest for a few years, and the cicadas that comes out every 15 to 17 years. And that was a new experience for me. And so now I have the pleasure of serving the public during a pandemic. So 2020 actually pulls it all together for me. I think I have experienced just about any emergency or significant issue in our community throughout the life of my career. When you ask what is similar about it, it requires all of us to pull together and to attack whatever it is in a unified way. When you look at hurricanes, you look at South Floridians or people from Texas or wherever throughout the country, whether it's fires or what have you, you see our communities come together, people hug each other, they attack the issue, and we're united, and it brings and breeds success. So that's what I see that's similar in what's, what I've experienced. And with respect to what's dissimilar, right now, if you were asking me, I would say that we're losing our patience. When we pull together for a hurricane, we're there and we are attacking it until it ends. With this pandemic, I'm finding that a lot of people are starting to lose their patience, and we're starting to turn on each other, and that makes me sad, because that's not the way a country pulls together. We do it together. We don't pull and fight against each other when you have something as horrific as what we're experiencing today.
We're going to chat a little bit more about that, because certainly, that's a concern for everyone, and it's certainly in all of our minds as we manage through this difficult time. Ms. Baker, what do you see as similar? I know it's been a tough year for you and all of us in local government, in fact, all of our citizens. What do you see as similar and different in some of these challenges that we're facing this year?
Well, what I find, I can actually ditto everything Ms. Henry has said and make this very brief, but I think that it behooves us to expand on what she's already said. And I think the most dissimilar things are, again, teamwork. It is no matter what comes our way, we pull together as a team, not only in government, but also the community as a whole. And I think when we first started this pandemic, people were a little cautious about, is this really necessary, et cetera. But after a while, and a number of, especially in Palm Beach County, because a large segment of our populations are seniors, and we entered this in March and April, our seniors paid the price. They were the ones that we lost early on. We now see that tide changing, because our seniors are listening to what we have to say. They're being cautious. They're wearing their face masks. They actually believe in safer at home, and that's what they're starting to do. And the numbers reflect that. I think that what else is similar is the fact that we as government still have to provide, even though this pandemic is new to all of us. We still need to make sure we're feeding our residents, we're transporting them where they need to go, that the housing is necessary. We're having to pay even more attention to our homeless, because we know at the end of the day, we may end up with even more people being displaced. So a lot of those are similar things that we would have to address during any disaster, including medical attention. What's dissimilar about this is the fact that we at the national, state, and local level can't seem to come up with a plan that we can all march to the same drummer. And that confuses our residents, which makes it much more difficult, especially at the local level, on how to address it. And I think Ms. Henry hit it on the nail on the head when she talked about people, they're just growing tired, and as a result of that, they want this over. And for the ones that believe it ought to be over, that's how they're behaving. For others, they're behaving a little differently. And so, normally when a disaster strike, I lived through anthrax here in Palm Beach County. My boss at the time was out of town, and I was the acting county administrator, and we pulled together very, very quickly on anthrax. We worked with the health department. We found the root cause. We took care of it. We made sure our residents had the information, etc. But because this pandemic it has been very lengthy, and we still don't know how long it's going to be, it is very dissimilar to any other disaster we've ever had to address. And it is every day there's additional unmet and unanticipated needs that we now have to figure out how to address.
Thank you, Ms. Baker. And we're here to talk about climate change today, but we can't talk about climate change in a vacuum, and we can't talk about it without looking at some kind of context of what's happening in the world and what's happening in our country right now. And so the next question kind of weaves climate change into some of our other national issues that we've alluded to, but we're going to try to drill down a little bit more into. Continuing climate change challenges are a backdrop at present to several very visible racial equity and racial justice issues that have risen to prominence in 2020, including protests against police shootings of Black civilians, as well as the higher COVID-19 sickness and death rates among Black and Brown people. As equity issues have become prominent in health and policing, there's also a growing sense that equity needs to be central in discussions of resilience and climate change. The people who are dying disproportionately of resilience and climate change, the people who are dying disproportionately of coronavirus are the same people exposed to the first and worst consequences of climate change. How can equity issues be centered in the region's discussions and actions on climate resilience? How can equity issues be centered in the region's discussions on and actions on climate resilience? Ms. Baker, you want to start with that one?
I will be happy to start with that one. I think by inviting a diverse perspective into the room, uh, what we tend to do, unfortunately, as government, is that we hold these discussions with the experts that may not have lived in those particular situations. So we need to invite the individuals that are living those situations to representatives to the table so that we can incorporate what they feel they need, not what we determine that they need. And I think that will assist us. In a lot of our underserved communities, we have dilapidated housing, housing that breeds mold, which causes more respiratory issues. And so when we have a coronavirus come into our community that specifically attacks the respiratory system, they're already vulnerable. A lot of people within the underserved community also work in jobs that are frontline jobs. They work in the grocery store, they work the lower level jobs in healthcare, etc. And a lot of us in those communities do not have the proper diets or access to the proper foods. And so we tend to be obese and have other health issues that they have not been properly addressed. So it makes us vulnerable right off the start. And so until we start to address some of those inequities, we're always going to run into these issues. Housing, healthcare, and proper education, proper training for the right jobs so that they can afford proper healthcare and proper foods, and also being able to train people on the types of food they should eat, not just because it's cheap, but unfortunately, eating healthy is very expensive. And in some of our communities, we don't even have grocery stores. And so that is a major problem. I think also with the climate change in some of our areas, sea level rise, et cetera, Lake Okeechobee is a major challenge for us here in Palm Beach County. So as the sea level rises, we're seeing some of our poor neighborhoods, they're dealing with a lot of flooding. And so when water is standing still, now we're dealing with mosquitoes and airborne diseases. Lake Okeechobee, with the latest ratings and the flood maps, we've got our cities surrounding the lake in Palm Beach County that are least able to afford higher insurance rates. They're the ones being hit with it because their rating is so high. And so I think it all folds together, and until we put in the proper infrastructure for all of our communities, we're going to continue to see our most vulnerable communities impacted.
Thank you, Ms. Baker. Ms. Henry, what's your take on the and perspective on on some of these equity issues as they relate to both Black Lives Matter and policing and climate change? Where do you see the connection?
First, I want to say that this is an exciting time for those of us that are in public administration. We've been dealing with these issues for a long time, and at the core and the center of all of this is that as a human race, we need to care. We have to care about what happens to the least of us. And thanks to technology, the rest of the world was able to see a person's life snuffed out in minutes with dispassion. And all of a sudden, people really began to, oh my goodness, this is what is happening, because were it not for the cameras that the public could actually tape what is going on. And even within the policing community, when they're having to wear cameras, now we're faced with real truths. We saw it with our own eyes, and we didn't like what we saw. I mean, as a nation, and clearly this left the United States and went throughout the world. People didn't like what they saw. And every day when you look at what is going on from a climate change perspective, my heart bleeds for those people in California when you watch a whole community burn down. My heart bleeds when you have a hurricane and people are wading through trying to find the last little piece of what was once their world. And I think that all of these issues are coming together, but they're coming together to say to us that we have to care, that it's important. And if we believe that, and you can touch that part of what makes us human, then I think that we can really come together and try to make solutions that is fair for everyone. You know, those of us that are hunkered down in our homes and in our businesses where we could social distance, and realize that we are so dependent on those individuals that were it not for them, we couldn't do it. We couldn't eat. We couldn't, you couldn't do the things that you need to do were it not for people that can't social distance and things like that. So we have to care. We're all linked and we're tied together. So until you start to see this in, all over this country, I'm going to speak for this country, it started to pull together that we have to care. And when you care, then you act.
So true. Thank you for those words. It's super important what you just said. So moving on to the next question. Coronavirus is perceived as a short, sharp shock, whereas climate crisis is seen as more of a slow burn. But addressing one and waiting on the other isn't really an option. How can responses to both crises be integrated? Ms. Baker? Let me go to Ms. Henry. You had the first shot at the last one. And Administrator Henry, would you like to start on that one?
Yes, you attack each of these issues pretty much the same way. They may be different in their impacts, but you have to attack them united. You go through the various steps and processes to address an issue. If you're in the military, you don't just drop a bunch of soldiers in an area and tell them to go shoot. You don't do that. You train them, you prepare them, you plan. So you go through all of what it takes for you to be successful in addressing whatever the issues are. And the fact that there are disparate impacts, that's good. That's par for the course on any issue that you face. So I think that we do what we go back to the basics. We go back to the basics, and we address these issues the exact same way. You've got to be able to plan. You've got to be able to communicate. You've got to be able to have a real assessment of what it is that you're doing. And you depend on various systems and tools. And let's not forget science, because when we're dealing with the hurricane, I don't know about you, but I know that I am glued to my television and I'm watching what the meteorologists are telling us. This is where this storm is, and this is where it is projected to come, and they're getting better and better at it. Why? Because they are good at it. They're practicing. They're using science, and all of that have allowed us to actually get through whatever the crisis is.
Ms. Baker, those fires in California and on the West Coast that Administrator Henry mentioned have shocked and saddened us all. And then we've seen, of course, the increasing frequency and intensity of tropical storms and hurricanes. You know, most recently the devastating damage in the Panhandle and along the Gulf Coast. Has any of this made you feel differently about managing, you know, climate change here? Are you more steadfast in our mission here? Is anything giving you a new perspective?
Well, over the years, definitely we have come to recognize that we've got some issues. I mean, when it comes to climate change, the buy-in over the years, especially since we've created the compact, has really driven it home. The sea level rise has driven it home. The least rain that comes in, we've got areas that flood. We don't even need a hurricane to recognize that particular issue. So it makes me clearly understand that as a country, we need to be a unified community, because this disaster as a result of climate change, which we have, you know, short of properly putting in the infrastructure to address it and planning for making sure we're burning underbrush that shouldn't be there, so that if when the dry season comes and we get a lightning storm, we don't end up with an unanticipated fire. And so we do need to take precautions when we can to avoid the fires in California. The storms that come, as we continue to look at our building codes, as we continue to build our community, we need to make sure that we're putting in the proper infrastructure to avoid when the hurricanes comes, roofs flying off, replacing old housing, helping our seniors replace their windows that may be 40, 50 years old, because that's how old the house is, so that it would be able to sustain the wind that comes in, to make sure that roofs are redone and properly tied down, that mobile homes are tied down, the ones that we have left. We don't have very many left. But I think those are some of the things that we have learned from other communities and on their unfortunate disasters. But I think here in South Florida, the other thing we have learned from hurricanes and now this pandemic is that we may not be exactly alike, but we are a unit here in South Florida. And the more we work together to ensure the safety of our residents, I think the better off we are. I think climate change, this pandemic, actually has shown us a lot of our vulnerabilities when it comes to climate change. The fact that we're going to need to deal with food, the fact that we are not necessarily dealing with other countries. We put an embargo on, we weren't importing things, and then we ran a shortage. So hopefully we will reassess and determine that it is important for us to ensure we have appropriate food and housing, and we close the digital divide. Again, there's a silver lining in whatever bad happens. And I think this silver lining just kind of highlights the fact that we need to ensure that our underserved communities are treated the same as our regular communities, our market rate communities.
Verdenia, I had to laugh at this because I was thinking about this question, and Hurricane Andrew came to mind. And after Hurricane Andrew, all of a sudden we had this building code called the Miami-Dade Code.
Yep.
And I remember there was a lot of conversation about people in northern Florida and other places. You know, they didn't want that to be a statewide code. Well, yeah, that's those people down there in South Florida. They're going to be the ones to get the hurricane. And
Right.
You and I are both from Tallahassee, and I can tell you that never in a million years would I have considered a hurricane going through Tallahassee wreaking havoc the way that whatever the name of that hurricane was that went through Tallahassee. That's the
Michael.
northern part of Florida. And you had situations where the entire state of Florida was besieged by one hurricane after another. So absolutely, we're finding that climate change, what used to be a South Florida issue, is now a state of Florida issue, is now a national issue, because these storms are not behaving the way they behaved 10 years ago.
Bertha, you're right. And I think we're all going to have to go back and look at our building code. Not only the U.S. building code, but the international building code, because we're seeing these hurricanes or typhoons hitting all over the world.
Yeah.
And so we're going to all have to learn from each other. And I went to Mexico Beach last year, and that was a year after, I want to say, Michael, one of the storms just ravaged that place. And I mean, it was a whole year. And I'm telling you, it looked like it was yesterday. It looked like a war zone. And so I think we all need to rethink how we're building.
Well, thank you both. We have to wrap up, but I couldn't finish this without talking a little bit more about the climate compact and how important it has been to moving our resilience efforts and climate change planning and action efforts in South Florida. And I think you'd agree with me that the compact itself has, done a phenomenal job. And I don't know if we have another minute, if you could just, close, give you a minute to close, and then we'll wrap this up.
Well, the compact, I'm sorry, you want Verdenia?
No, go ahead,
Go
Ms.
on,
Henry.
you started.
Well, clearly the compact did a lot for bringing our region together. And others are emulating what we're doing. And so before you know it, there'll be a statewide compact. It's just a matter of time. And that compact has allowed us to pull in the business community. It has allowed us to pull in so many different elements of communities in the region that we're all embracing it, and we all own it now. So it's been a wonderful thing.
Quickly, Ms. Baker, you have want to add to that?
Okay. I think the compact has definitely reaped benefits for us. We are working as a team, not only government, but the private sector as well. Even our media is involved in this. And so I think the fact that we are working as a team, not only Palm Beach County, but 7 counties, talking about the same thing. And now with the flood maps and FEMA, I think it behooves us all to continue to work together, look at and project what we anticipate coming forward, work together on infrastructure, even start working together on our bids so that we can get and train people to come in and do the work that we need to do in our community. I think the compact is a sustainable organization. We should continue to move forward and face these challenges together. Together, we'll get through it.
Well said. Palm Beach County Administrator Verdenia Baker, Broward County Administrator Bertha Henry, you're both so very impressive, and you certainly make me proud to be from South Florida. Thank you very much for having this conversation with me today, and carry on.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. We had to, because of scheduling, pre-record that, but together with the 2 county administrators and the deputy administrator, that's over 100 years of local government experience in South Florida between the 3 of them. Incredible amount of wisdom.